Welcome. Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you all here. My name is Bina, and I am a nutritionist at the New York City Department for the Aging's Virtual Smart Living Initiative. And today we have Alexis Smith. She is our moderator, and Alexis is a nutrition volunteer from East Tennessee State University. Alexis has contributed a lot to the preparation of this cooking demo. She prepared our flyer, our recipe card, and also prepared a lot of the information that we'll be talking about today. So thank you so much, Alexis, for all of your hard work. And I just also want to give credit to ACL. This event has been brought to you by the Virtual Smart Living Initiative, ACL Grant, in partnership with the New York City Department for the Aging. And just a few other announcements before we start is that all of the programs and centers should have received an email on May 2nd from the New York City Department for the Aging about counting virtual programming units. And there was also a memo that was sent out in December about nutrition education. So if you have any questions about that, please speak with your program officer or nutritionist. Okay. And also I want to mention that our next cooking demo is scheduled for Wednesday, June 15th at 11 a.m. The demo will be in English and the recipe will be summer breeze smoothie. So please mark that on your calendars. Okay. And so our recipe for today is Jamaican jerk chicken. And as you know, or as you may have noticed, we do like to taste the foods of different cultures because we like to make healthy eating stay interesting and exciting and delicious. And in the past, we've tried a South Asian recipe, an Asian recipe. We made the curried red lentil soup, Asian tofu stir fry, and sometimes we have seasonal recipes. Today, we decided to do Jamaican jerk chicken, which we're really excited, which I'm really excited to show you because it is a very tasty and delicious dish. So at this point, we're going to remove the flyer and you should be able to see my camera and my kitchen countertop spotlighted. So those are the two things that you should be able to see. And I'm going to go over what ingredients and that we use in this recipe, as well as the steps to prepare this. Okay, so just also a little bit of brief background about Jamaican jerk chicken is that jerking refers to a cooking method that was very popular in Jamaica. And it's first, like the meat or the poultry is marinated, and then it's also a lot of spices added to it, and then it's cooked slowly. And the reason why it's called Jamaican jerk chicken is because it's like cooked until the meat jerks off of the bone. So we're going to be learning about how to make this dish. So the first thing that we always do before we start preparing anything is always to wash our hands for 20 seconds with soap and warm water. And also very important, before you handle raw poultry and after you handle it, also make sure to wash your hands. So if your hands are washed, then you'll be ready to start. And we have a lot of different spices and seasonings that we're going to be using in this recipe, which makes it so tasty and so delicious. So the first thing is over here, I have cinnamon and allspice. And we're going to be using 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon and 3/4 of a teaspoon of the allspice. So I'm going to add that into my bowl over here. Okay. And then the next thing, because this is a spicy type of chicken, I put in over here, 1 teaspoon of chili flakes. You could use, you know, hot pepper like jalapeno or other types of hot pepper, but I'm going to be using chili flakes, a teaspoon of this, and as well as 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground black pepper, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. So if you have that measured out, you're going to add that into your bowl. And also other great things to add in. This recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of dried thyme and a teaspoon of dried oregano. So let's add that in. Okay. And then the next thing is we'll be adding in some dark brown sugar. So we have measured out 1.5 tablespoons of this. Let's add that into the bowl. And because this is a marinade, we need to add in some acid. So the recipe calls for vinegar. In this recipe, I'll be using balsamic vinegar, and we have measured out 2 tablespoons that we'll be adding in. Okay, great. So and some other things that we'll be adding in before we put in the chicken is we will be putting in 1/2 cup of cut up onion. I actually cut up a whole medium-sized onion, and which it comes out to a little bit over 1 cup. But because I really like the taste of onion, I'm just going to put in all of it. But before I put in all of it, I'm actually going to mix it a little bit. So I'm going to take a glove over here and just mix this around. Okay, and now I'm going to add in the onion. Let's mix that around. Okay. And then the next ingredient is the garlic. So the recipe calls for 3 cloves of peeled and finely chopped garlic. And you can just, this is over here, I have some garlic. So this is what you would do. I'm just going to move this aside for a moment. You would take a clove and we would peel this and then finely chop it. So we can do that over here. I'm just going to bring my cutting board to the center. And that way you'll be able to see how do I peel and chop a clove of garlic. So I'm going to remove the skin of it. All right, so here is 1 clove, and I do usually just give it a quick rinse before I start to chop it. So let's cut into that. Okay, and we're gonna just make that into really nice small pieces. Okay, so now that we have this, I'll add this to my bowl of garlic. Okay, and we're ready to add this into here. Okay, so let's mix that around a little bit more. And then we'll be ready to add in the chicken. So before I continue, Alexis, are there any questions so far in the chat?
I think there was one person who just asked if you could just show a little bit more of what you're doing, but I think you got it, so.
Okay. All right. So over here, I'm gonna get the chicken out. And I have here, this is 4 chicken breast halves. right over here. And just some information about chicken is that it's great to try to have more of the white meat versus the dark meat, because the white meat is lower in something called saturated fat. So if we want to eat in a way that's heart healthier, choosing the white meat could be a good way, and it's also lower in calories. And when we just think of like a 3-ounce portion of chicken, which is about the size of a deck of cards, the difference in fat and calories might not be so significant, but sometimes people eat a larger portion and then really the fat and the calories can add up. So it's great to try to have the leaner parts of the meat. And especially when we don't use the skin, that's also a good way to reduce the amount of fat and calories. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to add the chicken here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what we're going to do is we are going to really rub the seasonings well into the chicken so that it picks up all of the flavor. Okay. You really want to get the flavor well absorbed into the chicken. And what I really like about this recipe is that there's a lot of aromatics in it, which makes it so flavorful and so tasty. From the onion to the garlic, the cinnamon, the allspice, it's just a really flavorful dish. And by marinating this chicken, it helps to make the chicken more tender. So a lot of times people complain that, you know, white meat is dry, but it doesn't have to be. But the way that we prepare it could really impact how moist it is.
Ina,
Sure.
a question came in the chat. Is this boneless, skinless chicken that you're using?
Correct. Yes, it is. All right. Okay, so now that we've distributed the flavors throughout, the next thing that we're going to do is cover it. So I'm going to be using some cling wrap. And the reason why it's so important to make sure that this is tightly sealed is because we're handling raw poultry. It contains bacteria, and we don't want that to leak onto anything in our fridge, especially if it's something ready to eat like fruit, which is not going to be cooked. We don't want cross-contamination to happen, which is the spreading of bacteria to different foods. So that's why we're going to make sure to seal this well. So I have this cling wrap here, and I'm going to cover up this bowl. Okay. Make sure that it's tightly sealed. And now we have over here the chicken marinade, and we're going to put this into our fridge for 6 hours at least. And you could put it for longer if you want, but it should marinate for at least 6 hours. So you're going to take this and put it into your fridge. And because this is a demo, we're going to click on the fast forward button and fast forward for 6 hours. And then after 6 hours, you take this out. Okay. And you're going to get out a pan, which is what we're going to use to lay the chicken out on. But before you do that, make sure to set your oven to 350. So here we have a pan that we're going to put the chicken on. Okay. And this pan has been lightly greased with just a little bit of oil so that it won't stick. You can also use a non-stick pan if you prefer, or you can line it with some parchment paper. But because we're going to be covering this pan for the first 40 minutes with oil, I would actually just say to use a nonstick pan or just lightly grease it. So we're going to take the chicken and we're going to lay it out. Okay. And I do like to add the marinade onto the chicken because I feel like it's a great way to keep the chicken even more moist and tender. So I'm going to be adding in the onions onto it, as well as any remaining vinegar from the marinade. And I'm going to rub it onto that. Okay. And then I'm going to take a sheet of aluminum foil and cover it up. Okay. And we're going to put this into the oven for 40 minutes. So let's take that. Put this into the oven. Okay. And then after 40 minutes, you're going to take off the aluminum foil cover and you're going to bake it for about another 30 to 40 minutes. And you want it to be like a golden brownish color on the top. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how do you know that your food is safe to eat. And we're going to talk a little bit about using a food thermometer. So I'm going to get my oven mitts out. And we're going to fast forward until like about another hour and 20 minutes, assuming that it's been, that time has passed. Okay. And here we have it cooked. So now we want to see, is this ready to eat? So the only way that you really know if your food is safe and ready to eat is by using a food thermometer. Even if the color looks brown, it's still not a guarantee that the food has reached a safe minimum internal temperature. So I'm going to get my food thermometer out. We have it over here. Okay. And if there's anybody who currently uses a food thermometer, feel free to put that into the chat. But this is something that a lot of people might not be using, but it's definitely a very good practice. So this is what the package of the food thermometer looks like. Okay. And these food thermometers cost about, you could get one for about $5. But there's also a way that you can order one. I actually just spoke with the USDA meat and poultry hotline yesterday, and they offer me a free food thermometer and a magnet on some food safety information. So I'll be, I have their number over here if anybody wants to call them and ask them for a food thermometer. Their number is 888-674-6854. But just remember, this is only a food thermometer for a home. It's not for like, if you're an older adult center, this is not the right food thermometer for you. This is just for a home, and the limit is one per household. So I'm going to turn this on over here. Okay. And I'm going to insert the food thermometer into the thickest part of the chicken. And then we're going to read it. Okay. So let's see. You probably can't see this, but the temperature is going up as I'm leaving the food thermometer in the chicken. So right now it's 120 and it's going up. And the way that for different foods, the temperature will be different to know that the food is safe. But when it comes to poultry, you want the temperature to reach 165 degrees Fahrenheit or higher. Okay. So this over here, I'm going to show you what the temperature stopped at. Okay. This says 123. Now it's going down because I took it out of the chicken. So this is not, because this dish has been prepared yesterday and I was just reheating it. This is technically it hasn't reached 165 degrees yet. So what we would want to do is to put it in for a little bit longer and then test the temperature out again until it reaches that amount, 165 degrees. And then once it is, then it's ready to be served. So I'm just going to also mention is that this dish really leaves your home with such a great aroma, a very strong one. So it's going to really make your home smell great and really increase your appetite to eat it. Okay, so Alexis, are there any other questions?
Yes. First off, can you repeat that phone number that you just mentioned so I can put it into the chat for all the participants?
Sure. So the phone number for the USDA Meat and Poultry Hotline is 888-674-6854.
Okay, one person asked, could you also do this recipe in the air fryer or does it have to be in the oven?
Oh, that's interesting. I actually, I haven't made it in the air fryer before, but it's something that I probably would try if I had an air fryer.
One person asked, could you also add liquid smoke to the pan?
Add what?
Liquid smoke.
Liquid smoke. I'm actually not so familiar with liquid smoke, so that would be something I would want to look into. So the person who asked that, they could feel free to send me an email. And Alexis, if you don't mind putting my email like into the chat, virtualsmartliving@aging.nyc.gov, and they could communicate with me directly about that. And one other thing I also just wanted to mention before I forget is that if you have food safety questions in general, having the USDA Meat and Poultry Hotline number is very useful. Sometimes if I have a food safety question, I may give them a call. Like, let's say if you have food that you're not sure if it's safe to eat, it could be in regards to leftovers or really any food safety concern that you have. They're a great resource to have. And another point that just came to mind also is that food safety is something really important for older adults to practice, because as we get older, as we age, our immune system is not so strong anymore. So older adults become more vulnerable to foodborne illnesses. And so if we want to stay safe and healthy, practicing food safety is really important.
Okay, another question. Where can all the participants find the recipe for this after the recording?
Yeah, so it will be distributed the same way that you received information, the flyer for this demo. The recipe card will also be distributed as well from your centers.
I think you may have explained this before, but why is it called Jamaican jerk chicken?
Sure. So jerking is kind of like a cooking method that has been often used when Jamaicans were preparing this dish. So the meat or the poultry is marinated and also in a lot of spice. And then it's cooked very slowly and until the meat jerks off of the bone. So that's where Jamaican jerk chicken came from.
What kind of side dishes do you think would work well with this recipe?
Yeah, so if I would be eating this, I would try to have this would be the protein on my plate, and I would add in some vegetables, have like some type of salad with it. and then have starch with it. It could be a whole grain. It could be rice and beans. It could be cornbread. There's a lot of different starches that you can have. So I would just want to keep the dish balanced by having a variety of foods from different food groups. There's also something called curtido, which I think is lightly fermented cabbage that could also go well with this.
Awesome. How long can you keep this recipe in the fridge after you have cooked it?
Yeah, so once it's cooked, leftovers are generally good for about 3 to 4 days. So you would want to consume it within that time frame.
Why is food safety important, especially for older adults?
Yeah, so as we just mentioned, older adults, as they age, their immune systems become weaker. So food safety helps us to prevent illness and because they have those weakened immune systems just naturally from aging.
And I think that's all of the questions.
Okay, great.
Oh, there's another question that actually just came in. Can I use any other spices like to substitute for pepper?
Yeah, sure. You can definitely try using other spices. Really, whatever you like. Just the spiciness is something that is like considered to be an important part of this dish. But if you wanted to use other spices, you can. And if you don't like spice, you really don't even have to use it because there's so many other flavors going on. I think sometimes people even add ginger to it. And if you don't have all of the ingredients that we looked at, you could buy Jamaican jerk seasoning itself, which is a combination of, there's onion, garlic, and different herbs and seasonings that we've used today. So you can use that if that's easier for you, if you prefer to have that combination already.
Can you freeze this recipe? Can you do it can you freeze it once it's already cooked? Can you freeze it if it's raw?
Yeah, sure. So if you want, you can definitely freeze it. When it comes to, let's say if I have this cooked and then I want to freeze it, just make sure to package it well so that to prevent any type of freezer burn. But freezing is a great way to prepare food in advance and have it ready when you want it. So freezing is great. And, just be careful that when you take it out of the freezer to make sure to defrost it carefully. So you could put it into the oven if you want it to defrost it, and then just make sure that it reaches the safe internal temperature that we discussed, 165 degrees.
Is this recipe a little bit on the spicier side with the amounts of the spices that you used in this recipe?
Yeah, so it is a little bit spicy. I used a teaspoon of the Mexican chili over here, and I also used 3/4 of a teaspoon of the ground black pepper. So people like to use fresh hot pepper, but if you don't like it spicy, you can just reduce the amount of these or just use other ways to flavor it without spice. It's really what your preference is.
So would you say that you could also use spices that are already pre-made up in a jar rather than using a bunch of different ones?
Yeah, so if you meaning if you wanted to get the Jamaican jerk seasoning, it has a combination of those spices, you can get that if that's easier for you. The reason why I like to have, it happens to be that I already had all of these seasonings and dried herbs at home. But the thing that I like about being able to add it in myself is that, you can also control which ones you put more or less of. Like, let's say if you happen to be a person who really likes the taste of cinnamon, you might want to add a little bit more of that. Or if you don't like the taste of something, you could add less of that. But if you're getting it already made in the Jamaican jerk seasoning mix, then you can't take away from that.
Another participant asked, what would you do if the chicken is browned on the outside, but you check the temperature, but it's not done yet? It's not cooked to the correct temperature. What would you do then?
Yeah, so that's really important. Don't be deceived by the color. Even if it's brown, it does not necessarily mean that it's safe to eat. So you would want to put it in for longer until it reaches that internal temperature. Of course, you wouldn't want your chicken to burn. So if you wanted to cover it, and that way it won't be as dry, you can cover it and leave it in for longer, or you can add something more to it to keep it moist. But you want to make sure that it reaches that internal temperature, because that's really the only way to be certain that it's safe to eat it. And this is, an important point as the weather is getting warmer and more people are making barbecues. When you're grilling some hamburgers, even if it's brown on the outside, it does not mean that it's cooked and that it's safe to eat. You need to use a food thermometer to know that.
Kind of going back to different methods of cooking, do you think that you could make this recipe on a home grill?
Yeah, I think that you could do that. And that might add like also a nice smoky flavor to it. So there's different ways that you could prepare this dish. And if you wanted to do it in your oven, or if you wanted to do it on a grill, you could make it in different ways.
All right, I think that is all of the questions that I see. So,
okay, great. So just a few things as to mention again, for anyone who missed it at the beginning, all programs and centers should have received an email on May 2nd from the New York City Department for the Aging about counting virtual programming units. And also you should have received a memo back in December about nutrition education. So if you have any questions about that, please speak with your program officer or nutritionist. And the next cooking demo is scheduled for June 15th at 11 a.m. In English, we're doing summer breeze smoothie. If you have any suggestions for recipes that you would like to see us do a demo on, you're always welcome to share that information with us by emailing us, and Alexis will put this into the chat, virtualsmartliving@aging.nyc.gov. And if you prepare any dish that we've made or at home or at your center and you want to share pictures or any feedback with us, we always love to get your feedback. I know at the beginning of the demo, I think it was Chinatown Older Adult Center mentioned that their older adults prepared the chocolate chip banana bread recipe and they really liked it. So that was great to hear. Okay. And this event has been brought to you by the ACL Grant Virtual Smart Living Initiative in partnership with the New York City Department for the Aging. Thank you again to Alexis for moderating, and thank you all for joining.